Hi, I'm Stu from HiveMind Automation and welcome back to the Hive. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at some of my recommended add-ons for Home Assistant and how to install them. This is the fourth video in a series of getting started with Home Assistant in 2022 videos, and we'll be going through some add-ons that are available to install directly within your Home Assistant installation. We'll talk very briefly about one that requires installation of a custom component. So while I roll the intro, why don't you take a moment to subscribe and hit the bell icon to get notified when I release new videos each week. While you're at it, if you check out my affiliate links, you can buy some of the gadgets that you've seen in my previous videos, and that helps to support the channel as well. And there's some other ways to support the channel, such as signing up for NordVPN using my affiliate link below, or contributing directly through my Buy Me a Coffee link. With all of that out of the way, let's get started. So Home Assistant's pretty capable directly out of the box, but what makes it even better is the ability to extend it by using add-ons and custom components. In the context of a supervised Home Assistant, which is what we set up on our Raspberry Pi in video 1 of this series, add-ons are Docker containers that can then extend the functionality of your Home Assistant instance. If you're familiar with Docker, then you'll understand the flexibility that this affords to Home Assistant. There's a built-in add-on store in supervised installations of Home Assistant that allow you to quickly and easily install add-on containers. So let's get started with that. Now in our Home Assistant instance here, you'll see if we go to settings and then to add-ons, we don't have any add-ons installed yet. So it says to head over to the add-on store to get started. So if we click on the add-on store in the bottom right hand corner, you'll see that we have 3 repositories showing up. We have the official add-ons, we have ESP Home, and we have the Home Assistant community add-ons. Now each of these repositories has a number of add-ons in here. So for example, the official add-ons, we've got Z-Wave.js, MariaDB, and Samba. And each of these tiles obviously has the name and a brief description of what the add-on does. Now, in my opinion, there are a bunch of add-ons that you're going to want to install to make your life a little bit easier. So I'll go through my list of recommendations and then we'll actually install a couple of them. Now, in my opinion, you should seriously consider installing from the official add-ons store the Mosquito broker, unless you're planning on having an MQTT broker installed elsewhere on your network. You'll also want the Samba Share add-on installed because that exposes some shares over the network that you can quickly connect to and copy files to and from your Home Assistant server. And a little bit later on in this video series, we'll talk a bit about DuckDNS and Let's Encrypt. The DuckDNS add-on actually includes Let's Encrypt, so we wouldn't need those separately, but we'll talk a bit about those in a future video. From the Home Assistant community add-ons, there's a couple here that I would recommend as well. Now, depending on the accessories that you're using, if you're using Tasmota on any of them, I would probably recommend using Tasmo Admin, and we'll do a full video about Tasmo Admin in the future. It's a very simple web interface to centrally manage all of your Tasmota devices. And I'm not seeing everything that I want to recommend in here. So if I scroll to the bottom, you'll see that it says missing add-ons, enable advanced mode in your user profile page. So if I click on this link, it's going to take me to my user profile page, which I can also get to by clicking in the bottom left-hand corner. And if I scroll through here, what I want to turn on is advanced mode, which unlocks advanced features. I'm going to need that for some of the configurations that we're going to do. So I'm going to turn that on. I'm going to go back to settings and back to add-ons, and then I'm going to go back to the add-on store. And you'll see already that we have far more add-ons available. And straight away, one that I'm going to recommend for Home Assistant from the official add-ons is terminal and SSH. We're actually going to need this add-on for the next video where we're going to be setting up the Home Assistant community store. And this just allows us to log in remotely to Home Assistant using SSH. And it also provides a sidebar where we can access terminal commands for Home Assistant. As we scroll back down, we see more ESP Home. I'm not going to go into that too much. I will do a deep dive on ESP Home in a separate video. Some things that I would recommend from the Home Assistant community add-ons though are Studio Code Server, which provides a fully featured Visual Studio Code experience integrated right into your Home Assistant, and that creates a Studio Code Server sidebar item here. If you are, like me, a data nerd, you may want to look at InfluxDB and Grafana. However, I will probably recommend that you install those on a separate computer so that you can store data for a longer period of time. If you're going to install the MariaDB add-on for a SQL database server, it may also be beneficial to install phpMyAdmin, which allows you to interface with that MariaDB add-on using a nice web interface. Now, that's not to say not to install any of the other add-ons here. Obviously, you do need to be aware that if you are running on a Raspberry Pi, we do have limited resources. So the more add-ons you install, the more load you're going to be putting on your Home Assistant server. So just be mindful of that to ensure that you don't put too much load on your Home Assistant server and then start wondering why your automations are not running or taking a very long time to run. So to get started, we're going to actually install some of these, and we're going to start with Studio Code Server. So I'm going to click on the Studio Code Server tile. I'm going to click on Install. This might take a minute to install because it's downloading the Docker container. But while it's doing that, we can read a little bit about the add-on, and it tells us that it is Visual Studio Code, allowing you to edit the Home Assistant configuration straight from the web browser, and it's embedded straight into the front-end UI. And it runs as a remote server using Code Server and is a fully fledged VS Code experience, and it has the Home Assistant, MDI icons and YAML extensions pre-installed and pre-configured right out of the box. So autocomplete works instantly without the need for configuring anything. And there's a little demo picture there that you can see as well as to how that looks. So we'll just wait for this to finish installing. Okay, so Studio Code Server has finished installing, and we've got some options here. We've got Start on Boot, which is going to start the add-on as soon as the system boots up. We've got Watchdog, which is going to restart the service if it crashes, so I'm going to turn that on. We've got Auto Update, and that's going to auto update the add-on when there's a new version, so I'm going to turn that on as well. And then the last thing here is Show in Sidebar, and when I turn this on, you'll see the screen flicker for a second, and then we'll see Studio Code Server in the sidebar. So I'll turn that on, and then we've got Studio Code Server. And before we click Start on here, we can see that we've got some documentation, and we can take a look in there and see what the different settings do when we go over to configuration, and we can add some initialization commands, some additional packages, and we can show some optional configuration panes that are unused and we can change things like the log level when we do that, or the configuration path. I'm not going to change anything. I'm going to flick that switch off. I'm going to head back to the info page, and I'm going to click Start. And we now see the host name, the CPU usage, and the RAM usage of this container. And if we head over to logs, we can see the logs for this container, and we can refresh those. But if we now head over to Studio Code Server in our sidebar, this may take a minute to start up because this is the first time we've started it up. And you can see we have a Visual Studio Code interface here, and I'll click I understand on that. But now, straight away, we've got access directly to our configuration.yaml file, and we can go and edit that file. We can go to our secrets file and add some secrets, scenes, automations and scripts, etc. And if we want, we can click on the cog in the bottom left corner and go to settings, and we can go and change some settings here. So change the fonts, change word wrapping, and all sorts of other things in here. Like I'm looking for dark mode actually is what I'm looking for. So if I find window, auto detect color scheme, and it's auto detected that we're in dark mode, so that is good. And now when we go back to editing our configuration, we're in dark mode. So that's Studio Code Server, and that was a very easy add-on to install. What we're going to do though is we're going to install something a little bit more complicated. So we'll go to Add-Ons and the Add-on store. Now I have a separate video showing you how to install and set up the Samba Share add-on. So if you're looking to use that, go ahead and click that link and you'll see how to set up the Samba Share there. So now that we've got Studio Code Server installed, and that was a really easy add-on to install, I want to install something a little bit more complicated to show you how it works, but also because this particular add-on that I'm going to install is actually required viewing for the next video, in which we'll install the Home Assistant Community Store add-on. So to install Terminal and SSH, we're going to go to the settings again, we'll go to add-ons, and we'll go to add-on store again, and we'll click on the Terminal and SSH tile, and we'll click on install, and we'll wait a couple of minutes for this to install. Okay, so OpenSSH has installed, and again, I'm going to turn on Watchdog Auto Update and show in sidebar. So we've now got terminal showing up there. Again, if we look at the documentation, we can see some stuff that we can do here, and I'm going to go to the configuration tab because we do need to set some of these configuration items up. The one that we absolutely need to set up is either an authorized key, and this is the recommended setup where you would copy and paste your SSH key into the authorized keys, or we can set up a password. It is not recommended to use a password. It is recommended to use an SSH key. If you're not sure how to set up an SSH key, by all means, Google that for your platform, whether that is Mac, Windows, or Linux, and you can generate that SSH key. I'm just going to set up a password in this case. It is not recommended. That said, if you are not exposing this to the internet, then you shouldn't have too much trouble, but I'm going to just set this up now. So I've set up a password, and something else that we can do so that we actually have access to this device over the network, so I'll be able to SSH into this device from my Mac, is I will flick this switch to show the disabled ports, and it says change the ports on your host that are exposed by the add-on, and it's got this 22/TCP here, and we also need to put in 22. And what this is going to do is it's going to forward port 22 from the Docker container that's going to be running and expose that on the Raspberry Pi. So I'll click save on that. And I also didn't save the password, so I'm going to need to retype that. And I'll type that in and I'll click save. So that's now saved the password and it's saved the port settings. I'm not going to worry about audio I/O. We'll head back to the info panel and we'll click start. And now if we head over to terminal, it's still starting, so we're getting a 502 bad gateway. But if we click that again, now that it's finished starting, we see we've got Home Assistant, and this is just a command line interface for Home Assistant, and we can type in HA and we get some help data here. So we've got HA, and we can see here that we can do controlling the host, the system that it's running on, so the Raspberry Pi, or we can control Home Assistant core. So if I type in HA core, that was a really bad spelling, of course. I'll try that again. And you'll see now that we have HA core, and we can do a check, we can do a restart, we can do an update, and we can even do an update to a specific version. and there's other things in here. So if I go HA Core Info, it spits out some information about what we're on. So architecture is ARM architecture, 64-bit. We've got an internal IP address, the last version that we're on, etc., etc. So there's quite a bit of power in the command line interface. So now that we have terminal and SSH installed on the Raspberry Pi, I've just got an iTerm2 window open here on my MacBook, and if I type in hostname, we see it's Stuart's MacBook Pro 2.local, and over here hostname is core-SSH. So now if I type in SSH and type in root at 192.168.1.146, I happen to know that that's the IP address of my Raspberry Pi. I'm going to then hit enter, and it's asking me, because this is the first time we're SSHing into this device, it's asking me about the SSH fingerprint, and it doesn't know what this is. So it's asking me if I'm sure I want to connect, and I can type in yes, and it's going to then ask me for the password for the Raspberry Pi. And this is what I said in the SSH settings a moment ago. So if I hit enter, we now have the same prompt that we had over in the Home Assistant window. We've got some ASCII art there, some details of our device, so the IP address for ETH0, the IPv6 address, etc. So now we can also type in HA Core Info, and we get the same output there. And if we hadn't added this port 22 in the configuration of SSH, we wouldn't be able to access this across the network. Now that we're done SSHing into this, we're going to just type in exit, and we're done. Now it's worth mentioning that when we were asked for our password up here, if we had used an SSH key in the configuration instead, the SSH public key that we can share with other devices, had we used that, we wouldn't have been asked for the password, provided the SSH key of the device that we're SSHing from matches the key that is allowed in the configuration of the SSH setup. It would have just let us in. We wouldn't have needed the password. So the last add-on that I do want to talk about is the Home Assistant Community Store, also known as Hacks. And I'm going to do a separate video on installing Hacks because it stands on its own as a topic. It doesn't need to be buried in a video about other add-ons. So that's installing add-ons in Home Assistant, and some that I recommend highly. Now, before we finish up, it's worth mentioning that if I go to the add-on store here and then click on the three-dot stack in the top right-hand corner, there's this repositories item here. And I can click on repositories and I can add new repositories. So if you stumble across a Home Assistant add-on repository where someone has created some really cool things for Home Assistant, you can add that repository through there. Let me know in the comments section down below what Home Assistant add-ons you're using in your smart home and some that are your favorite. That's all we have for this video, and I do hope that it helped you in your home automation journey. Be sure to comment down below with home automation ideas you'd like to see covered in future videos. And don't forget to follow HiveMind Automation on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. If you like this video, hit the thumbs up button down below, and that will give it a like and help the YouTube algorithm to recommend my content to more users. And if you're not already subscribed, please consider subscribing now. While you're at it, if you hit the bell icon, you'll also get a notification when I release new videos, and that's normally every week. If you're currently in the market for a VPN provider, I've placed an affiliate link for NordVPN in the video description as well. And I chose to partner with NordVPN because they have the best infrastructure of any of the VPN providers I've looked into. They have a strict no-logs policy, and they have servers all over the world. On top of that, they've got apps for just about every platform, whether it is Windows, Mac, Linux, iOS, or Android. So that means that no matter what platform you're using, you're able to protect your personal information while you browse the web, and especially on unsecured networks. So get a VPN today and use my link below to sign up for NordVPN. Lastly, if you like what I'm doing here and you want to help to support the channel, I've put a Buy Me a Coffee link in the video description as well. Contributions that you make through Buy Me a Coffee are put towards making more and hopefully better content for you to enjoy. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Stu from HiveMind Automation, and I'm looking forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.